Welcome, tennis fans, to another edition of Changeover Chat in the TennisONE app. I'm Randy Master, and today we have a very special show for you. Our guest is a native of Toronto at Tennis Canada. She became the first ever woman to become tournament director of a Master Series 1000 event, the Rogers Cup. She went on to become the president and then CEO of the WTA Tour, and is currently the chief executive of professional tennis at the USTA, and the first ever female tournament director in the 140-year history of the US Open. Welcome, Stacy Allastar.
Thank you, Randy. And it's great for us to finally connect. And I just want to also give a big shout out to all of your listeners and thank everyone for being tennis fans.
Oh, well, thank you. You're as big an advocate for the sport as there has ever been. I was going through your resume this morning. I just wanted to know, do you have any other executive level positions in tennis that I don't know about? No,
I've done a nice job covering it. I was started out as a certified teaching pro at 16. The first job was really cleaning the red clay courts at the little community club on the border of Canada and Niagara Falls. And, really being able to be a teaching pro at the age of 16, I learned the foundation of business and communication. And I just look back on all of it now, and that really gave me that passion that I could actually make a career out of tennis on and off the court.
So let's move forward many years from your start in Canada.
Just a few, buddy. Come on. I'm a protege. It didn't take me long to get all of that experience in.
So I want to go right up to the U.S. Open of this year. Sure. You haven't talked about that in a while, so I thought I'd bring it up. It's in the midst of a global pandemic. There is world mayhem. You have about 8,000 challenges in front of you, as does your team. You're not even sure whether you're going to play the U.S. Open. Stacy, what could have ever prepared you for a situation like this? I just have to think it was overwhelming, but if anyone was ready to do it, it would be you.
Well, there's no question that it was a day-to-day exercise of perseverance and a mindset to win. So, I think born with some really good genes, where despite my 5'1.5" and being a Canadian, a small country, having no connection with the establishment of tennis, not just in Canada, but globally, with very little tennis talent, that I could and I did achieve, overseeing Tennis Canada, running the Master Series, building a stadium, then having the privilege of working and growing the sport at the WTA level. And then now at the USTA level, it's just there's something in me, the combination of relentless and never giving up, combined with a passion for the sport, and that combination combined with a solid foundation of crisis management. This was supersized without question, because it was really almost 6 weeks of being inside our centralized environment, and I dealt with a lot of crises, disasters, terrorism, natural disasters through that portfolio, especially when I was at the WTA, 55 events in 33 countries. And it's the amalgamation of years of leadership, that positive mindset, the will to win. And lastly, I'm one of an incredibly talented and US Open senior management team that has that same spirit and passion that I have, that collectively we knew when we locked arms together, we would mitigate risk and we would show the world that our sport and American tennis could return to play and return to play in a safe way.
So, Stacy, this was 1 year where I got to stay home, sit on the couch and watch as much tennis as I think I've ever watched in the US Open. And I think I think ESPN may have had some lower cameras this year and some different angles.
Yeah, for sure. Mhm.
And it really made it exciting. And certainly I miss going out there and seeing friends and socializing as you do out there. But it was the tennis was phenomenal. And from my viewpoint, you really pulled this off. So congratulations. I want to talk a little bit about the bubble. I mean, like a lot of people, I'm kind of bubbled out. I don't like I don't like talking about bubbles that much anymore. But you had some serious protocols in place. I read that you did about 7,000 tests. This was a global sporting event in the midst of a pandemic, like no one has ever seen the likes of that I know. There were a few incidents with some French players that we don't need to rehash, but with everything that you were doing to keep the players safe, you had to figure there were going to be some outliers and a couple of things might happen. It didn't, it didn't surprise me that there were one or two, call them glitches in the entire fortnight. But can you tell me overall, how do you think the USTA did in keeping the players A, happy, B, well fed, and and C, and most importantly, how'd you keep them safe?
Well, I think we get top marks on all three of those, and I'm biased. But I'm going to let all of the player comments that we have been reading about in the last couple of weeks, since they have left New York, that I think they now understand everything that we did for them to first and foremost keep them safe and healthy, that we created an environment to optimize their performance and to be able to come back and play, and give them as much sort of novelty and fun and address being sort of in this centralized environment for them. Look, the majority of them were there for a couple of weeks. We opened the official hotel on August 15th. We had the Western and Southern Open, followed by the US Open. You had to be in the bubble on August 15th to the final day, September 13th, to have been in it for 4 weeks. The reality of it is, 75% of the US Open competitors were on their way back to Europe on that Friday morning, the first week of the Open. So it was a long stretch, and we are social creatures, and we're used to doing what we want when we want. And it was a rigorous environment. We had to be diligent. And for us, we were leading the way. This was the first of all, it was the largest event in the world to be staged since the global pandemic. And I didn't say sporting event, I said event, because there was 60 countries, athletes from 60 countries. We did almost 15,000 tests. We had 3 levels of tiering, and the testing was in the level 1 and the level 2. And that number of tests doesn't even include those that came from ESPN and the testing that they did. So, day in, day out, we had to educate the athletes. They had to adjust to this new environment of how they could return to work and stay healthy and safe. We had cultural differences. We had demographic issues. Different people had different lenses of COVID. We've got a young, very strong mindset professional athletes that are invincible. So day in, day out, wear the mask, keep your distance. And the key to all of it is, in fact, the testing frequency. And all we really wanted, and we committed to mitigate risk for the health and well-being for everyone. We committed to the athletes, their guests, the tours, our staff, our sponsors, the governments, that we would keep everyone as healthy and as safe as we could. And we achieved that. The safe US Open, the safe Western Southern Open, all of the rest of it was an added bonus. and
Right.
we will forever be known as the organization that helped to reboot our industry worldwide, that helped our sport. Now look at all of the events that are happening. We showed and gave everyone the confidence that we can, tennis can return to competition. We can all return to work. And ultimately, as we talk, this is for the fans. And I'm so glad you got to watch so much tennis because it was it was new tennis, because so many of them were used to having those 24,000 really energetic fans. I never had to tell the chair umpire to tell everyone to be quiet, but that was missing, and we missed the fans. So they had to get their energy from somewhere else, and the mental tenacity to be in the environment for that long, sometimes with the smaller entourages and not their family and friends, it was mentally tough.
It was.
I got to tell you, the women's semis, I thought it was I've seen a lot of tennis. I thought it was some of the most exciting women's tennis and competitive tennis I've ever seen. The 11 mothers and 3 of the 4 semifinalists mothers. And then what a final. What a final on the men's day. We couldn't have had more dramatic ending to the 2020 historic US Open.
It was great tennis, and I just spoke with Pam Shriver on this show, who echoed your sentiments about the quality of the women's play. I agreed with her. The women, in a way, outshone the men, and she basically said that because the women in the semifinals and finals looked like they were swinging freely and were playing without that kind of pressure that you saw Team and Zverev played with. It was a dramatic as men's final, as you can see, but I think you would agree it wasn't the prettiest final, but it was absolutely dramatic, and the tennis on both sides I thought was phenomenal. Moving on to Roland Garros, where we are now, and that's heading into an exciting conclusion. Were you in touch with the FFT during the US Open, during the French Open? Now they must have learned a lot from you, or did they want to learn a lot from you? What's that communication like?
One thing that sometimes crises do that unite sport and they unite leaders. We've spent quite a bit of time with the FFP leadership, and we've had conversations with Tennis Australia. We've got a call with them tomorrow night. All of us, we want the journey and the experience for the players to be somewhat consistent, to help them once again understand how we can return to work and return to competition safely, and that this is kind of the new norm. It felt so foreign to so many in New York, and you heard the feedback, this is too strict and etc. Now it's, gee, that actually was all for our betterment. And the one thing with COVID, you have the dynamic of every day you don't know what you're going to get with the virus.
Sure.
And you're working with different local public health authorities and different governments, different medical doctors, and how they proceed. So you have to be adaptive, but the fundamentals are there, and we see it. We see everyone wearing their mask in Roland Garros, and that's the new norm, and that's one of the fundamentals of protecting yourself and protecting others. And I'm feeling their pain because at this stage of the competition, you'd think it's well in hand, and it is. They went through those entry points where you expect to have positive tests. It is part of it. How they managed it, etc. They did it absolutely a great job in accordance with their local public health authorities, just like we did. Yeah. But now, they're into the quarters, they're in the semis and the finals, and you're like, oh, gee, we've got to keep everyone safe because they don't want to lose those matches. And so you never stopped worrying about people's lives.
So, Stacy, as you know, we'll switch gears a little bit. Roger Federer tweets in April something alluding to the ATP and WTA coming together as one. Obviously, it was a tough time for everybody then. So, let's get together and try to figure out what we can do, because we might have a big break right now. Rafa agrees, Serena chimes in. I haven't heard a whole lot of talk since then until now, and we'll get back to that. Pam Shriver, who I did have on last week on this show, and I quote her: "There's no other sport that has this partnership. A merger should happen. I don't know what the men are thinking right now. How do they not think that a male and female entity wouldn't just be the way to go?" Do you agree with Pam?
I agree that our sport needs to work together more, collaborate more, and let's not get stuck on the governance model. It's just how can we collaborate to compete with all of the external forces to rebuild out of COVID, and we are better united than divided. I can only speak from my role currently at the USTA.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that the 7 stakeholders are engaged in conversations on how we might be able to collaborate. And that doesn't happen often. And I have been around for a few decades now. But I do think there's genuine sincerity. Where we end up remains a question mark. But the leaders of all of the organizations are at the table talking about how we could, whether it be shared resources, joint marketing, is it aggregation of content and rights to potentially unlock value for the sport. The one thing that we need to do is we have to stop sort of internally being worried about each other and be united as a sport to compete with the external competitive forces with inside sport and entertainment and into the economy in general, and do what's right for fans. Tennis, we have a lot of passionate people, and I'm one of them. And, it shouldn't be what I think. It should be what consumers and fans want. And businesses need to evolve. They can't say status quo. And those that do generally don't, thrive. We have such a competitive advantage to all of the other sports, and Pam is right. Men and women competing on large stages and the quality of their play, so that fans get to see it. And there's a moment in time, and Virginia Slims knew in 1973, they were well ahead of progression of the inclusion of women and women as consumers in this economy, and they make most of the consumer decisions, that we need men and women together, and we need diverse people of color for our sport to thrive. What do fans want? What do corporations want? What do broadcasters need in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years? Let's get the consumer insight to evolve what our product should be and how we then might collaborate, how we might have alliances, and not get stuck on having to, we've got to merge. That's heavy lifting. We have 7 different governance models. How can we collaborate for our sport, and most importantly, for our fans, and have sustainable growth?
Yeah, and I'm not going to get too into this story. There was a long story in SBJ about Andrea Gaudenzi and his ambitious plan that is, it talks about the tournaments, about maybe increasing the player fields at the Masters 1000s, possibly moving the 250s on the men's side into the second week of the Masters 1000s, but then a model based on what you were talking about, pooling all the media and data rights and using that windfall as kind of a trickle down to the events that may be getting hurt by this new model. It's ambitious. It's going to take some years to try to figure this out, because it does essentially bring in all 7 bodies that you were talking about, and I think pulls all those rights together from a media standpoint. If I'm right, that would be ultimately the goal there. That said, then you throw in Novak Djokovic and his creation of the Professional Tennis Players Association right before the US Open. Not great timing. He says that he's spoken to Gaudenzi. I don't know what came of that conversation. But Novak claims to have more than 100 men's players and over 100 women's players. I can tell you, I spoke to 2 WTA players this morning. They don't know anything. They knew when Novak did this, and Vasek Pospisil and Sam Querrey, but they haven't spoken. They haven't agreed to anything. So you obviously are on the inside. You know a heck of a lot more than me. But what are the chances that they're going to be successful in this quote unquote players union? And if they are, can they work side by side with the tours? And I know there's a lot there, but I'm just interested to hear your take on, would this be good for the sport if there was a separate players association that was representing the players?
Well, look, go back to what we just sort of talked about, that we as a sport need to be united. At this time of crisis, we are better together than being divided. This pandemic is having dramatic impact on every industry and on every business, including tennis. And you saw from the US Open that all 7 stakeholders united around support for the ATP and the WTA. And we're at the table working together to see how we can collaborate for sustainable growth for our business, serve our fans, serve our organizations, and ultimately be able to have an industry where athletes and professional athletes can earn a great living. So that's kind of where we're focused. We're supportive of Andrea. He was hired on the vision that you're talking about. No one's agreed to anything. We want him to succeed, and we just need to really understand what the business plan is. I'm speaking right now as the owner of the Western and Southern Open and ATP Master Series tournament.
Yeah.
We're also, they're engaged at the T7 level on our long-term vision as one sport, on what that might be able to look like. And we remain laser focused on how we can collaborate together as a sport. And that's our goal, and that's how we're going to win.
Yeah. So I appreciate your insight on all of these important issues. I know it's not fun. I mean, you've been in sport, a long time. I'm not trying to age you, but you've.
No, it's okay. I said a young protege.
But
lots of cycles, and part of the elements of Andrea's vision. It's not new. We have long talked about how our sport is not realizing its full potential. We just have to look at the most successful tennis events in the world, or successful events. They tend to be the premium, large events, premium content, consistent scheduling, men and women on big stages. And then just how do you calibrate the other tournaments? How many tournaments do we need? All of those variables. And, I went to the WTA in 2006 under Larry Scott's leadership, and many of the elements of Gaudenzi's vision were part of, at that time, what Larry called the roadmap. And we wanted to go much further than we ultimately did. We still progressed women's tennis. but we can never, get full agreement. And that's kind of what happens in tennis.
Yeah.
We all want change until it affects us. And this is where consumer insight needs to come into play. Rather than us being emotive about it, being, attached to it because it's our fiduciary responsibility to protect our assets. What are consumers telling us that they want for our product? Because at the end of the day, if we all don't like that bottle of water that sits on the shelf and no one buys it, it goes off the shelf. And tennis is just too insular. We need to look externally, look at the market forces, and ultimately be driven by consumer demand and ultimately by our fans.
Yeah. Well, it seems like there's a lot happening in that respect, and I
Sure
think
is. It's never boring in tennis. That's why I've been, every day is different.
yeah, and trust me, being in the sport as long as I have, there's nothing I'd rather see. I want to see a combined tour. It's been talked about for so many years, and I'd love to see it. I talked to Katrina Adams. She doesn't think the sport needs a commissioner. She was a little bit hot and cold on that one, but then she said maybe down the road. I'm not going to talk to you about that's a whole different question. So we don't need to get.
There's a lot we all can do together.
Yeah.
For the greater good of our respective businesses, for the fans, and look, at the end of the day, for the USTA, we want more people to play tennis.
Yeah.
And we use the pro tennis tournaments, the assets, to inspire fans to want to play or consume. Just as it worked this year, it worked with you, and we actually got you to watch instead of you're always sort of working in the sport. And look, that's what it's all about. And this 2020 US Open combined with the Western Southern Open gave us an opportunity to inspire fans and bring new participants to our sport, and for us to be able to rebuild the tennis economy in this country and contribute in a small way around the world.
Absolutely. Well, before I let you go, I wanted to have a little bit of fun. We've been talking about a lot of serious topics, so I'm going to give you 10 rapid fire questions. Most of them will have two choices. Some are a little bit more fun, but are you ready?
Okay, I'm into fun.
Is Canada Dry Ginger Ale Canadian?
Yes.
You're absolutely right. Is Greg Ruzetsky Canadian or British?
Canadian.
Okay.
He's Canadian Brit. He was born in Canada. He chose to use his British passport and play for Britain. I respect him for that commercial decision. I was at Tennis Canada at the time.
Okay, so 2 in a row. This one we're probably going to have to wait a while to find out. Who will win a slam first, Felix or Dennis?
Wow. I'm not answering that question. I listen. I take my guidance from the analysts. Johnny Mack. Everyone really talking up Felix a year ago. Dennis just really impressed me on how he's maturing. He's got the competitive fire. They're both going to. How about that? I just don't know who's going to do it first. They're both they're top tenors, and they're very worthy of winning slams.
Agree. Molson or Labatt's?
Molson.
Leafs or Canadians?
Leafs. I'm from Toronto. My grandfather would strike me down. He had season's tickets. My dad still has season's tickets. And now I live in Tampa. I had to move to Florida to get a Stanley Cup.
Yeah. Well, you have a heck of a team down there. How many slams will Bianca finish with when her career ends?
Whew.
Ballpark.
10.
I think.
She's got the game. We know that. She's got to get healthy, and she's working on getting healthy. She's got to make adaptations. She's mentally tough. And she proved that last year. So physically get healthy, the opportunity is there for her.
Okay, just a few more. Prettier anthem, "O Canada" or the Star Spangled Banner?
Not fair. I'm not answering that. They're both unique.
I love it. I mean,
I get emotional on both, and
oh, okay.
yeah.
I love O Canada. I mean, I have it on like my Spotify
Obviously.
mix. So, what tennis event should be considered the fifth slam? I know you're not touching this one.
There's only 4 slams, Randy.
Great
But
answer.
I will say, of the next level, not really allowed to have favorites, but Indian Wells, the BNP Paribas Open, everything that Charlie and Raymond have built, and I was around when they were building it and achieving their dream, and it was a time that maybe it wasn't going to stay in the United States, and having Larry Ellison come along, and just seeing everything they have done. It's a gift to our sport. It's a gift to American tennis. And I want every event to be as successful as the BNP Paribas Open. It's great for tennis. We come back to what it's all about. It's great.
It is. So let's, last one, Roland Garros, men's winner, women's winner. And I can tell you, I don't know if you knew Schwartzman beat Thiem.
I know, 5 minutes and 5 hours and 7 minutes. Dominic just obviously ran out of gas, and Dominic Schwartzman, he's just a.
So
he earned it. Look, I have to pick Novak. He's just so mentally tough, physically. Well, be very historic for Rafa. Be sentimental for me to pick him, but I think it's Novak. And on the women's side, Sonia Kenin.
Great choice.
Bring her on. You can do it. Back. No? Yep.
Yeah. Love to see that, because she had a tough time when she got back into things, and now she's found her game.
Hitting her stride. Yeah. So again, another really strong competitor, hardworking, fantastic ambassador for U.S. tennis and our sport overall.
Certainly. Well, Stacy, this was interesting. We'll technology kind of let us down a bit, but we'll figure out how to.
We got through it, and I appreciate you doing this podcast, because it's another form of engagement for our fans, and having people connected to our sport on a regular basis is key to our sports success. So thank you for being entrepreneurial.
Sure, we're having a blast at TennisONE, and we look at ourselves as a mobile extension to the sport and a tech extension. And as I've always said, all we're trying to do is grow the sport, like everyone else.
The USTA cannot do this alone, and it's the aggregate of private enterprise like TennisONE, like all of the professional tournaments, clubs, teaching pros. Together, we all are united that we love our sport and we want it to grow. And the more we work together, the more our sport we can bring it to everyone. And look, everything in my professional life has come from the sport of tennis.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be where I am today in my career and in my life if it had not been. And we change people's lives ultimately, and we give social connections. And there's a little kid out there that maybe one day will, be the next Randy Master or Stacy Allastar, and it's cool. That's what sport does. It's fun.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. I know you're busy and getting ready for next year's U.S. Open.
We are. Right now. We already approved the 2021 U.S. Open Wilson Ball. It was like crazy. They're already going into production. So we're on our way for 2021.
All right, Stacy. Well, hopefully I'll see you out there in person at some point.
That'd be that's our goal.
Get through this. Yeah. Okay.
Meantime, stay safe. All right, Randy.
Thanks so much.
Cheers.